Hello and welcome to our webinar on the Hong Kong B&O visa. It's lovely to see you, and over the next hour we're going to be discussing how B&O residents in Hong Kong and also those currently in Britain can apply for the B&O visa and achieve settlement status in the UK. Now, I will begin with a short introduction to two of our panel members and to the firm generally. Now, the introduction will be followed by a short presentation, which is divided into two sections. Firstly, we will give you information about the B&O visa itself and how it is that you can apply for it. Now, the second half of the presentation is going to focus on life in the UK as seen through the eyes of someone with Hong Kong or someone of Hong Kong heritage. Now, and then we will move on to my favorite part. And my favorite part is the question and answer session. And I hope to leave about half an hour following the presentation in order for us to conduct the question and answer session. During the Q&A session, you will get the chance to put your questions to the panel and hear them discuss their answers. Now, we've already received some questions from people over the last few days, people who wanted questions answered, and I will also be putting those questions to the panel as well. So make sure you don't miss that part out. The Q&A session is very important because I'm sure the panel will be able to answer your questions and put your minds at ease. Right, so on that note, let me introduce you to our panel. Now, Miss Soumaya Eddridi is one of our immigration experts, and she has been described as a rising star in the legal field. She's commended for her detailed knowledge of the immigration rules. Now, Soumaya passionately believes in freedom of movement for all people, and she loves helping those who've chosen to start a new life in the UK. Soumaya will be explaining the technical side of the B&O visa. I'll now move on to Danny Lai. Danny Lai is a senior manager at Saracens. Danny, being a genius at organization, is the guy who keeps us all in check at the firm. A team leader, he represents a bridge between senior management and staff. Danny is a DIY enthusiast, a self-taught gardener, and an animal lover. A keen traveler, Danny aims to travel to 100 countries in his lifetime. That's quite some bucket list. He's currently at 50 countries and growing. Great. So now that you've met our panel, let me quickly tell you something about the firm itself. Saracens is a commercial law firm based in the heart of London. We're on the Strand in London's West End, for those of you who know the city. We specialize in general commercial work, including real estate, commercial property, residential property, contract law, company law, dispute resolution, family, and of course, immigration. Now, we believe in building trust through understanding, and for us, it's more than just a company logo. It is what we actually do. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Soumaya so she's able to begin the presentation. Soumaya, it's over to you.
Thank you for that, Nishtar. Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today. I'm really excited to share with you more information today about the B&O visa. This is quite a unique visa compared to other visa routes, and I will be demonstrating how this visa works in practice. So I understand that sometimes the law can be quite complex to understand, particularly if you don't work in the legal field. So I will be using two case studies to demonstrate how the visa works in practice for those who are looking to apply. So to start off with, our first case study is for Mr. Chan and his family. Mr. Chan is married and has 2 children and is currently living in Hong Kong and would like to come to the UK on the B&O visa. Our second case study is Katherine Wong. Katherine Wong is actually here in the UK. She is a B&O status holder and has just completed her undergraduate and is looking to continue living in the UK. So let's start off with our first case study, Mr. Chan. So the first thing that an applicant would need to meet is they would need to show that they are a BNO status holder. What that means is that they were registered as BNO citizens under the Hong Kong British Nationality Order of 1986. So that means that most people who were born after the 1st of July 1997 are unlikely to be BNO status holders, because the deadline for registration was the 1st of July 1997. So that would be the first requirement that Mr. Chan would need to meet. Now, in our case here, Mr. Chan was actually born in 1981, and so was his wife. So he meets this requirement as he was registered at the time. However, his two children, who were born in 2011 and 2012, are not BNO status holders. And usually with the BNO status, this cannot be passed on to children. Nevertheless, his children can still apply with him when he is applying for the BNO visa, given that they're under the age of 18 and they are still dependent on him. So they are considered as his child dependents. So that would be the first requirement for Mr. Chan to meet. Now, the second one is that Mr. Chan will need to meet the ordinary residence of Hong Kong requirement. What does that mean? In order for Mr. Chan to meet this requirement, what he will need to provide is certain documentation to evidence his connection with Hong Kong and that he is a resident of Hong Kong. So it could be things like, for example, an ID card, a medical card, a letter from his employer or university, which demonstrate that he is working or studying in Hong Kong. So that is in terms of the ordinary residence requirement. Now, let's move on to the financial requirement. Like most visa routes, there is a financial requirement. However, what's unique about this visa is there isn't actually a minimum maintenance requirement that the applicant will need to demonstrate. So here, Mr. Chan will need to show that he has adequate maintenance and accommodation for himself and his family when he is applying for the visa, given that he has not been in the UK for the past 12 months and he is applying for an entry clearance visa. So that's in terms of the financial requirement. Mr. Chan will not actually need to meet an English language requirement. Most visa types require you to meet some sort of level of English language. And I appreciate that with most Hong Kong residents, they're actually English speakers, but it's quite useful not to have to worry about actually preparing certain documentations or taking a particular test. But what Mr. Chan and his family need to do is take a tuberculosis test at a Home Office approved centre before applying and to meet the TB requirement. So given that they're currently residing in Hong Kong. So we've discussed the main requirements. The final step for Mr. Chan is to actually apply. So he can either apply for a 2.5 years visa or a 5 years visa. The difference between the both depends on how much you're looking to stay in the UK, whether you're looking to settle, for example, here, whether you are, also there is difference in fees. So that is something to take into consideration when applying. And we can assist you with coming to that decision when it comes to the date of application. So Mr. Chan will benefit from many things when it comes to actually applying under this route. He can work, he can study, he can take up self-employment, he can even take up voluntary work, he'll have access to the NHS. So these are all some great benefits in terms of the BNO visa. So just to summarize, to go over that, so Mr. Chan will need to meet the BNO status holder requirement, ordinary resident in Hong Kong requirement, adequate maintenance and accommodation, and take the TB test. Also, one thing Mr. Chan will also need to do when he's applying, which I forgot to mention, is that he will need to also declare any criminal records that he might have. So now let's move on to Katherine Wong. So as I've mentioned, Katherine Wong is actually someone who's already in the UK. She's been here for the past 3 years. And in our case here, she's been very fortunate to have been offered a job offer from a startup company here in the UK, and has a 5-year skilled worker visa. So let's say that Katherine wants to switch to the BNO visa. So she would actually not need to meet the financial requirement. It's automatically met because she's been here for the past 3 years. Likewise, she will not need to take a TB test because she's been here for more than 6 months. And she will meet the ordinary residence requirement by also showing that she's an ordinary resident of the UK. And the particular term that the Home Office look at is that she needs to show that her regular habitual mode of life in a particular place, it has been, for example, in Hong Kong or here in the UK, for example. So, so these are some of the things that Katherine Wong will need to show. Now, the question is, why would Katherine actually want to switch from a work visa, which offers her 5 years, to a BNO visa? And here we're sharing with you a picture where Katherine looks slightly worried. And there's 2 main key things to take from this. The first thing is, under the skilled worker visa, Katherine will actually need to be here in the UK for 5 years in order to meet the settlement requirement if she wishes to settle afterwards. And also, there's also the concern that during this 5 years period, if her employer no longer needs her and decides to terminate her employment, her visa will be curtailed and she'll be required to leave the UK unless she's able to find an alternative route to apply under. So the BNO visa actually offers a security in that you're not required to be sponsored by someone. If she wishes to change her employer, she doesn't have to worry about her visa being cancelled. If she wants to go back into education, if she wants to start up her own business, there aren't requirements that restrict what she can and cannot do. But the only thing she can't do is she can't work as a sports person or a sports coach. Also, she can combine her previous leave under the student visa, which is 3 years, and her 2 years as a BNO status holder to meet the settlement requirement, which is 5 years continuous resident. So she doesn't actually have to wait an extra 5 years. And that's quite useful, particularly for those who are looking to settle here in the UK and ultimately set up their lives here in the UK. So those are the main key requirements for the BNO visa in both case scenarios. I hope that is clear. And of course, if you do have questions, please feel free to share them with us. I'll be handing you over back to Nishtar, who will be introducing our next speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Soumaya. That was very interesting and comprehensive. I very much enjoyed the fact that you used 2 examples. One of the examples was Mr. Chung, who's based in Hong Kong with a family. The second example being Miss Wong, living in the UK already. So we got both perspectives. Right, okay, I can see there have already been some questions that have been raised in relation to the content of what you've said in your presentation. So I will put those to you after Danny's presentation. And I think Danny's presentation should take roughly about 10 minutes. So on that note, Danny, it's over to you. Kindly introduce yourself to the audience.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Hi. Thank you, Nish. Again, my name is Danny Lai, and I've been working at Saracens for the past 1.5 years, where I'm the senior manager of the administration team. Just a bit of background about myself. I was born in Manchester, one of the largest UK cities in the north of England. studied in the Midlands, and after graduating from university, relocated down south and currently live in the outer London area where I would normally commute from. I have family in the UK and still have a sister, her family, and an aunt who live in the New Territories in Hong Kong, as well as many friends in Wan Chai and Kowloon districts.
Thank you for that introduction, Danny. Can you share some of your experiences and those of your family? I know you were born in the UK, but your family has been coming to and from Hong Kong, studying in the UK and spending a lot of time here. So can you share some of their experiences and the feedback they've given you?
Yep. Just to recap. Yeah, I was born in the UK, but over the last few years, 2 nephews in Hong Kong came over to study. It's very interesting to watch them adapt to life in Britain. One of the main reasons behind their decision was the high standard of education in the UK. There are more universities for them to choose from here, and a wider variety of degree courses available to them. In Hong Kong, education is very competitive and it's often hard for students to find a suitable place, but they didn't have that problem when they got here.
That's interesting.
One studied an accountancy degree at Preston University, based in the north of England, and the other went to Birmingham University in the Midlands to study English language. Even though both of them studied in different places, they did share similar experiences. They both felt very safe in and around their campus environments. They didn't feel isolated or out of place, given the large number of students around. They also said that the UK enjoyed a far more relaxed study environment and felt less pressure to perform than they had back home in Hong Kong. Obviously, their mum and dad would call in now and again just to check in, making sure that they're still motivated and studying hard. And I'm pleased to report that both of them actually graduated with honours first time. Another major difference was the student accommodation, whether living in halls of residence or sharing privately rented houses. They loved the amount of living space. As you know, in Hong Kong, a lot of people share flats, which can be a little cramped, especially when there are multiple generations under the same roof. So the luxury of having their own private rooms with ensuite bathrooms was a real eye-opener. And one interesting point for you to note was about the internet coverage. People from Hong Kong often complain about the speed of broadband in the UK when compared to Hong Kong. A useful tip from me, after trying out various and lots of different providers, is that Virgin Media came out as the best.
Virgin Media, a little bit of free advertising there for Virgin Media. Okay, just for the sake of completeness, I use BT. As an internet provider, I find it perfectly reasonable in terms of performance. There we go, Danny. Danny, can you tell us a little bit more about what people can expect and look forward to if they want to come here to the UK in order to work?
Yeah, of course. The COVID pandemic has had a major impact across all services and industries, not just in the UK, but around the world. However, the UK is a resilient country and will recover and remain as one of the leading financial capitals in the world, with many international companies still basing their headquarters in the UK. The UK is at the forefront of many fields of science and medicine, and major player in other industries such as insurance, legal and financial services. In technology, in London, you now have the East London Tech City, which has become recognised as a major hub for leading and innovative technology companies. What job you get in the UK, though, will largely depend on having a good standard of education, a good command of English, useful transferable skills, and a certain degree of independence. That will put you on an even footing with the rest of the UK population that is actively seeking work. When it came to work, personally speaking, I moved from Manchester to London to find work because it had the most opportunities at the time. And even right now, for example, there continues to be a shortage of teachers and medical staff across the UK.
Okay, so thank you for that, Danny. I mean, that's a comprehensive insight, into issues that people have to think about when it comes to work. putting work aside just for a moment, are there any other challenges that people will have to consider or face when they want to come and live? Maybe challenges when it comes to integrating into UK society. Can you give us an insight into anything like that, Danny, from your own personal experience, of course?
Finding suitable accommodation should be a priority, and it will be a priority. I think London has by far one of the highest population densities in the UK, and it's also one of the most expensive places to live too. Property prices are highest in the capital, and many workers tend to rent or purchase properties in the outer areas of London and travelling to work using public transport. This is similar across all the major cities in the UK. Finding affordable and subsidised rental properties can be difficult for many people, even now, but there are lots of agencies that will help you. If you're thinking of buying property either to live in or as an investment, then right now is a good time. House prices have come down during COVID and are expected to remain that way over the next 6 to 12 months. And remember, as I mentioned earlier, living space in the UK is generally better than that in Hong Kong, as you do get more for your money. As far as integration is concerned, there are still large Chinese communities over here that have been firmly established over years across England. By far the biggest contingencies in London, followed by Manchester, Birmingham, Liverpool and Leeds. They all have their own Chinatowns, and they can be a useful way of meeting people, finding work, preserving your identity, and reducing the feeling of alienation and isolation of being away from Hong Kong life. My mother still lives in Manchester's Chinatown, and she won't have it any other way. Regarding health concerns that you might have, the UK has the NHS, or the National Health Service. This is the publicly funded healthcare system which provides free healthcare at the point of entry for all patients and without discrimination too.
Great, thank you, Danny. It's always good to plug the NHS. That is our real national treasure here in the UK. Outside of work, I mean, you've talked a little bit about work and you've talked a little bit about study and accommodation, but what else does the UK offer as far as you can see outside of work and outside of study?
Well, I've lived in London for many years now, and I love the fact that you have such a rich and diverse mix of cultures here. It is truly cosmopolitan. There's plenty of nightlife and entertainment if you want it, and it's slowly becoming a 24-hour city, with public transport staying open later and later to help feed that change. When my family come over here to visit the UK, they always try to fit in London because of the many tourist attractions available, such as Big Ben, the Houses of Parliament, but there's also the historical palaces and castles and gardens attached to the British royal family and the National Trust. My family and we also enjoy holidays and foreign travel. The UK is at the doorstep of Europe, which makes it so much easier to visit other countries on the continent, having the option to travel by car, ferry, coach, Eurostar or plane. It just makes it affordable no matter what your budget is. And even after Brexit, traveling to Europe from the UK will still be easier with or without a visa. Other things to enjoy about the UK, I would say, are the museums and galleries, the world famous Chelsea Flower Show, various theatres and concert venues, music festivals such as Glastonbury and the annual Notting Hill Carnival. And if you're interested in sport, for football fans, we have all the world famous Premiership clubs like Manchester United, Liverpool and Chelsea. You can even go on match days or tour the stadia even when there are no matches being played. Two huge highlights of the sporting year are probably Wimbledon and the British Grand Prix. And if you love a bit of a gamble or just love horse racing, we have a large number of races, including the Grand National and Royal Ascot. But I still think neither venue is as grand as the Happy Valley Racecourse in Hong Kong. And finally, we all love a bit of shopping. My nephews loved the big shopping complexes here, such as the one in Trafford Centre in Manchester, Selfridges and Harrods in London, and the Westfield malls. Anyone, even cash-strapped students, can buy cheap, high-quality clothing or choose to spend lots of money on expensive designer labels. And online shopping is a really big thing in the UK, with free delivery to your home. And for bargain hunters, there's even outlet centres with famous international brands at discounted prices, such as the one in Oxford called Bicester Village.
Okay, brilliant. I can see that you have a lot of passion about a number of things. I mean, mentioning the Chelsea Flower Show, you're a keen gardener. Mentioning the Premiership, you're a Manchester United fan. Thank you for that insight. It was actually very useful, very interesting to listen to. So thank you so much for that, Danny. I hope that our audience understands or has a little bit of a better insight into what they can expect when they come over to the UK and actually live here as opposed to just visiting. Right, okay, on that note, I think it's time we moved on to the Q&A session. There were a number of questions that the audience, there's a couple of questions the audience have raised already. There were also questions that have been sent in before we started the seminar. And for everybody watching, please remember, listen, if any other question occurs to you, you don't have to raise your hand. Please just use the chat box instead. Your question will then be passed on to a moderator, and he will then pass that question on to me. I will do my best to put your question to the panel and get them to answer as many questions as possible in the time remaining. I mean, we have half an hour, so we're perfectly well on time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a question that has been asked today and was also asked before. So this is obviously not of concern, but this is something that a lot of people who are looking at the B&O visa, something that they are actually interested in. And that question, I'd like to put it to you, Soumaya, if that's possible. The question is basically, if an applicant, somebody who wants to apply for the B&O visa, has a criminal record in Hong Kong, specifically as a result of any protesting that they have been involved in, so the pro-democracy, freedom of speech demonstrations. Now, if they have been penalized by the government, the Chinese government, as a result of that, is that having a criminal record going to affect their ability to apply for a visa here in the UK? I think, Soumaya, if we could get an answer from you on that.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a very good question and an important one, particularly with the current climate in Hong Kong, and also the concerns that many applicants might have who were involved in, the demonstrations. So what the policy guidelines states about this is that the Home Office will look at whether you have serious convictions and whether you engage in behavior that is considered or deemed to be conducive that is not conducive to public good. So when you're actually applying, the form is an online application. So if you do have any criminal records, you should definitely declare that. And if you have concerns that your criminal record was as a result of peacefully demonstrating in protests that are in relation to freedom of speech, for example, then again, you should explain that. And what we would do, for example, as your legal representatives, is that we would get as much as evidence and context behind that particular criminal conviction and prepare representations to the Home Office that will explain the context, refer to any evidence that we're providing, and the Home Office is obviously aware of the situation in Hong Kong. They're aware that there have been pressure to prevent people from actually, for example, demonstrations through, for example, criminal records or imprisonment or things like that. So, and they appreciate the human rights aspect of this. So, I would say, if your criminal record is one that is not serious and one that was involved, for example, in peaceful demonstration, one, do declare that. Two, we will assist you through the process. And three, there is more to the context than what meets the eye, and that's why it's important to explain it, and to show why this criminal record in particular has arisen. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it does go some way to answering the question. I guess what you're saying, Soumaya, to us is, generally speaking, if you do have a criminal record, that has to be declared if you ever make a visa application. And if it is a criminal record, certain criminal records of serious criminal offences, it is likely that the Home Office would refuse an application. However, there does appear to be a grey area, let's just say, when it comes to these pro-democracy or the human rights demonstrations that we've all seen on our TV over the last few years, in fact. So just because somebody has been caught up in protesting and demanding their rights and have been penalised by the government, that in itself, on its own, is unlikely to make the Home Office or the UK government refuse the application. And when applications are made for the B&O visa, if there is a criminal record and then it does relate to pro-democracy demonstrations, then it does appear that they will allow us to make representations. So applicants, through their lawyers, would make representations, disclose what their criminal record is, and the UK government, although it's making no promises, I think by its own conduct and the various press releases and statements that ministers have made about, say, for example, not turning their back on Hong Kong, the UK being one with Hong Kong. I mean, these are very strong words, and from what it appears, having a criminal record or being penalised by the Chinese government is not going to scupper the application in itself.
Yes.
Good. Brilliant, because that's what I took from that. The fact that there were a number of questions, and the reason I took a little bit of time explaining that was because this question has been asked in 2 or 3 different ways. So it shows that it's obviously of concern to those people who want to make a B&O application. Okay, brilliant. We have another question for you, Soumaya, and that question is slightly different. It's about the financial requirement that you mentioned in your part of the presentation. So you did explain there was a financial requirement, and a couple of people are asking, what is the minimum income that an applicant has to show, and what is the minimum income for an applicant who has dependents? What do they have to show to the Home Office as part of the visa application?
That's a very good question. So as I've mentioned, the B&O visa is quite unique in many respects. So there isn't actually a minimum income that an applicant needs to show, or a minimum set of savings that they need to show. Instead, what the Home Office requires is what is known as adequate maintenance. And there is a particular formula for that, which varies depending on whether you're applying alone, if you're applying with dependents, how many dependents are there, what's your income like, whether you have additional savings, and what, just to give you a brief idea of how the formula works, is essentially they'll look at your, for example, your weekly income minus your weekly cost of living, and the amount that equals to should equal, or it can either equal or be more than the amount that for example, a family or an individual will receive if they were on income support. Income support is a type of benefit that some people are entitled to receive in the UK. And so it's not as stringent compared to other visa requirements. And what I would suggest for applicants to do is consider, what type of income they have, whether they have any additional savings, and then we can work through that formula with them and advise them whether they meet the requirement. The Home Office have also added that they will take into account whether there is other like viable sources of maintenance support. So if you have family or friends who are willing to support you through the process as well in order to meet that maintenance requirement, then they will also consider that.
Okay, all right, thank you. So, I mean, that's it's a comprehensive answer again, but it's very different to what I've heard when it comes to other visas. Apparently, from what I'm taking from what you're saying, there is no fixed financial requirement. Instead, it seems to depend on your income and your expenses. And those factors include wherever the applicant is going to settle, for example, in the UK, what his living expenses are going to be, or her living expenses. And it appears that it's going to be difficult for applicants to actually work that out accurately by themselves, because it looks like you need someone on the ground. You need to know that there is a difference. What is the difference in the cost of living, say in London and Manchester and Glasgow, say, for example? So it's very useful. I think it would be very difficult for applicants to actually work out by themselves whether they fulfill the financial requirement. And in reality, they should speak to someone on the ground, maybe someone like you, Soumaya, an expert in the field, to work out if they are eligible to meet this requirement. Good. I was completely unaware of that. I always thought, like with the other visas, there's usually a figure where they say you have to have this much money in order to maintain yourself, but that's not the case. And it's for the B&O visa, and it seems to be worked out on a case-by-case basis. So that's very interesting and very different. Do you know why they've done that, Soumaya? Is that another example of a concession made for Hong Kong B&O visa holders?
Yeah, I think so. I think the whole idea of the B&O visa is not to make it difficult for B&O status holders and their families to move to the UK. The idea is that the UK is extending their hand to Hong Kong B&O status holders. And it wouldn't make sense if they were to add quite stringent and difficult requirements to meet that will prevent people from applying. So I think that is just another way of the Home Office saying that we want to help you through this process, and we want to make sure that those who can apply do apply and come to the UK. Okay,
brilliant. Thank you. I have a question from Akil, a couple of questions. I'm going to put the first one to you. It's a bit of a general question. Akil is asking, will the UK government help set up in the UK for residency, schooling, and offering secure jobs, as has been said in Parliament? I can put this question to you, or I can possibly answer it myself. The UK government has said publicly that it is absolutely committed to assisting B&O visa holders. It's made changes to the immigration rules. It's introduced this visa. It's changed the requirements to make it easier. It has made certain leniency when it comes to, say, for example, what we were talking about earlier, the criminal records. But nowhere in the middle of that have they said that they are going to set up B&O visa holders with property and schooling, or they're going to offer them secure jobs. I have not come across that anywhere. The ministers have talked about support and putting processes in place, but they aren't going to be offering a home and a job, a secure job, to people just because they're coming from Hong Kong. people who come into the UK are going to be expected to be on an equal footing with residents already in the UK. So they will get assistance in getting here and help in integrating, but I really don't think it's going to go to that extent, Akil, in terms of the question that you've asked. So I think that answers that question without having to ask any of the panel members. Danny, there's a question that came for you about life in the UK, and this must be from someone living in Hong Kong, because they've asked, what are the transport links like in the UK in order to get to work?
All right. Okay. Well, I know that Hong Kong's MTR is probably one, if not the best metro system in the world. The London equivalent is the London Underground, or we call it the Tube. It may not be as cheap or as clean as the MTR, but the Tube is the oldest metro system in the world. We do have free Wi-Fi available, albeit intermittent, but they are slowly widening that out, and air conditioning is also being introduced too. The Tube may not be as regular as the MTR, but given the number of workers who use it daily for work, it's still pretty efficient and modern by any standards, and tourists also seem to enjoy it too. And like all big cities with a metro system, it does and can get crowded during peak hours. Across the UK, we do have a good train infrastructure. Again, it might not be as cheap, but big cities like Manchester also have a tram system, and there are many bus networks in most towns which serve the working population well.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Danny, because that was obviously a question from somebody who fully intends to come to London or to the UK, and has plans in place and is inquiring about transport. Okay, another question which is here is actually for Soumaya. It's a technical question about the fees that are involved, the Home Office fees. How much will these visa application cost? And are there any hidden costs? Soumaya, can you give us your insight on that, please?
Yes, of course. So I don't know the figures from the top of my head, but I have them with me here, because I thought that we would probably receive a question like that. So in terms of the Home Office fees, when they were first announced, I was positively surprised, because the cost of the application is not as, for example, expensive compared to other visa routes. So for the 2 years and a half visa, which is 30 months, it's actually £180. And for the 5 years visa, it's £250. So if we were to compare that, for example, with, I don't know, let's say a spouse visa for an entry clearance, you're looking at 1,500 and something just for the visa application alone. But in addition to that, there is the IHS surcharge, which is essentially like the fee that you pay, which will allow you to access the NHS, which, as Nishtar has mentioned, and Danny, it's a treasure in itself. So the cost of the IHS surcharge fee is £1,560 for those who are applying for the 2.5 years visa, and £3,120 for those who are applying for the 5 years visa. And that applies to most type visa routes. So you still have to pay for that for most type of visa routes. And the fee is slightly less for children under the age of 18. Now, you might think, oh my God, that's a very large amount. However, what this fee, as I've mentioned, once you've paid this fee and your visa application is successful and you're here in the UK, you will be allowed to access the NHS. So, for example, registering with a general practitioner if you need to see a doctor, if in a case of emergency you need to go to the hospital, God forbid, like something like a surgery, it will allow you to do all that for just that fee. So it's almost like your health insurance, except better. So, and it's a one-off fee that you pay when you're applying for that visa and for the duration of your visa period.
Okay, good.
Those are the fees involved.
Good. That's interesting. I mean, a couple of things emerged for me from that. One is the actual Home Office fees have been reduced by about 90%, compared to other visas. So that's a good sign for B&O visa holders. And the other thing that came out of that was, can you confirm everybody has to pay the IHS? Every applicant has to pay the IHS surcharge?
Yes, that's correct.
That's right. It's
Yeah.
everyone. And without it, it's part of the application. They pay it when they make the application.
Yes. So you'd be required to pay it when you're making the application itself. So the application is an online application, and when you're about to submit it, you'd pay the Home Office fees, and you also pay the IHS surcharge fee, and that will allow your application to actually be processed and considered by the Home Office before a decision is made.
Okay, all right. I have one question about adult dependents, which I'm going to put to you, Soumaya. The question is a simple one. Can adult dependents apply under this route?
Yes, they can. So the Home Office have also made provisions for adult dependents, for example, like parents who might be dependent on you.
Sorry to interrupt, Soumaya. Can you tell us what an adult dependent actually is, quickly?
Yeah, so an adult dependent is essentially an adult, so someone over the age of 18, who is dependent on you as a result, for example, of illness, disability. So they rely on you in terms of daily activities, and you provide them with support. A lot of the time, this could be, for example, a parent that you continue to support. So the Home Office have made provisions for them. You'd have to show, one, what's their relationship connection to you, and two, that they're actually dependent on you. So, for example, you'd provide like medical evidence and things like that to show why they fall under the category of an adult dependent.
Okay, and this applies to parents, grandparents?
So it applies to parents, grandparents, a brother, a sister, a son, or a daughter. Okay.
And if those children are over the age of 18, but they are, I mean, you talked about being dependent from a health perspective.
Mm-hmm.
What about financial dependency? Does that include? Is that
so sorry. So the B&O visa have actually created quite extensive provisions to allow those who are related to you or live in the same household to actually apply with you. So there is also a category for children who are over the age of 18 and form the same part of your household. So, for example, they still live with you as part of supporting them, and they still have that family connection with you, so they can still apply. You'd have to show that obviously the relationship requirement, you'd have to meet all the other requirements, and that you'll need to show they form part of the same household as you do, which is, I think, quite common from what Danny has mentioned in terms of Hong Kong families, that they still live together for the most part, giving living spaces or just the culture of staying connected with your family.
Okay, that's good. I mean, I think that's going to be very useful for everyone because, like you said, culturally speaking, people from China do have a different way of living, culturally speaking, with their families, which is slightly different to the way that we live in the UK. But I guess what you're saying is the visa, or those that have, the government who's put the visa forward, they have thought about these things. So parents, grandparents, brothers, sisters, children, even over the age of 18, all of these people may be eligible, so that the whole family unit can move as one. I guess that's the point. Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that answer. I'm just conscious of the time, but Danny, I've got a quick question from you, which is relevant to what's going on in the world at the moment. The question is, are UK residents all working from home at the moment? And what are the expectations for the next 6 to 12 months?
Well, following COVID, I mean, as you all know, all companies are now having to adapt to a different working practice and an environment, basically. What we've certainly learned over the past year is that more and more companies are now introducing flexible working arrangements, especially if they're going to have to survive or succeed. This means more and more people are being presented with a choice of working from home, even if it means a few days in the week. I think this, and effectively, it will reduce the amount of commuting time, which can only be a good thing. Travel costs, and that will also improve work-life balance. I mean, I'm certainly in favour of having a choice of coming into work or not, as the case may be. And I do think this is going to be a long-term shift now in most companies.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. There appears to have been a shift in the mindset for UK companies here. And I'm not just talking about the companies, I'm actually talking about the employees. So those of us that work in these companies as well. The enforced lockdown has caused us to reassess the way that we work and the way that we live, and like we mentioned, work-life balance. There are a number of things that we want to achieve, and I think a lot of people now believe, I mean, I've been keeping an eye on a number of polls and opinion polls that have gone around about this, but a lot of people will be expecting to work from home even when the restrictions are relaxed. So that's very useful to know, and it's something that anyone coming to the UK in the next 6 to 12 months should know, should be aware of. So thank you very much for that answer, Danny. A quick question for you, Soumaya. What is the process of switching from a work or student visa to a B&O visa?
That's a very useful question, because we do have a lot of Hong Kong nationals who are already in the UK and maybe B&O status holders. So for those, the process of switching is an in-country process, which means that you can apply from inside the UK. It's quite similar in that to other visa types. When you're switching, you complete an online application form, you pay your fees, you submit your supporting documents, you'd attend a biometrics appointment. One thing to bear in mind is, because of the COVID restrictions currently and lockdown rules here in the UK, if you do submit an application after the 31st of January, just bear in mind that you might not be able to attend your biometrics appointment for a few weeks or months until actually centres reopen, so that you can attend an appointment where you'll basically take your a photo will be taken of you, and you'll get your fingerprints taken, and you might be required to provide certain identity documentation when you attend your appointment. But nevertheless, that does not mean that your application you should not submit an application. You can submit it, and you'll be able to be eligible to continue living in the UK, so long as you meet all the requirements in terms of switching. So you can stay in the UK until the application has been processed and a decision is made.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. I think there's a quick question that's come in from Kenneth, which is really a yes or no answer. So I'm going to put that to you quickly, Soumaya. Can you access public funds at any time if you're granted a B&O visa?
So with the rules in relation to the B&O visa, you actually cannot access public funds. You'll be able to access the NHS. There may be some fees when you go to see your dentist, as with most people who are, like, for example, even British citizens. However, you can't access public funds. Having said that, if a situation arises where, for example, you're struggling financially, you have children who are dependent on you, like unforeseen circumstances, the Home Office has an application where you can request to access public funds. It'll be considered based on your particular circumstances, and it's just important to know that it is there. However, the visa in itself, the B&O route, does not give you the right to access public funds.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. That's comprehensive. The answer is no. Okay, all right. Another question coming in. How much time would it take for an application to be successful or rejected from Gil? I guess what they're asking is what is the processing time for the B&O visa? Soumaya, can you answer that?
Yeah, so for applications made, for example, in the UK, if you're switching, generally the processing time is 3 weeks, but it can take up to 6 weeks. And for those who are applying from outside the UK, the processing time is generally 12 weeks, but it can take up to 24 weeks. Having said that, we should add a disclaimer that, again, we are going through the COVID-19 pandemic, which has caused delays to many visa routes. So that is just something to bear in mind. We do have the standard processing time for it. However, it's not guaranteed that your application will be processed within the standard processing time because of just certain delays in relation to COVID-19.
Okay, brilliant. So on average, from what you're saying, people are looking, well, anywhere between 6 and 24, or an average of maybe 12 weeks for a decision to be made. Okay, all right. And we have to take COVID into account. I know, do you know if there are any priority services available for this application yet? If that information has been released or not, I'm unaware.
I believe there might be. I don't know from the top of my head, so I'd need to check. But most visa routes, particularly those who are applying for entry clearance, there might be some sort of a priority service because it is a visa that leads to settlement. So we just need to check at the date of application. And even if you do come and ask us, we can check there and then. Sometimes there have been visa routes that have offered priority service, but due to COVID-19, that priority service was removed. And sometimes it comes back temporarily and then removed. So so we just need to check whether one, there is one, and two, if it's available for you at the time you're submitting your application.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so that's a good answer for me in terms of understanding how long the application could possibly take. Okay, we have 5 minutes left. I do have to ask this question of Danny because a couple of people have put this to us. Does somebody flying in from Hong Kong have to go into self-isolation after arriving into the UK? Danny, can you answer that?
Yep, sadly, that's a yes. Unfortunately, travel restrictions do currently exist in the UK, and anyone arriving from Hong Kong will need to go into self-isolation. I believe it's currently a 10-day period right now, and there does need to be a negative coronavirus test before entering. I think obviously the government can impose new rules at any time and testing requirements, and that can be with very little warning as well.
Okay, that's short but sweet. So the answer is yes. They do have to self-isolate. I did hear on the news last night about these quarantine hotels that have come up in the UK. And I did check, knowing that we'd be doing the webinar today. And happily, China and Hong Kong are not currently on the list of countries whose, if their residents arrive in the UK, they have to quarantine in a hotel. I think at the moment there are about 20 countries on the list. Hong Kong, China, they're not on there at the moment. So that's a relief. Great. Okay, brilliant. I think looking at the time, that is going to conclude our webinar for today. Now, if you have any further questions, please can you contact us? And you can see coming up on your screen our contact details. So you can contact us by telephone, you can see there, by emailing the team directly, the immigration team at Saracens. You can find us on Facebook and LinkedIn, also on Twitter or other social media. If you have any questions that we were unable to answer for you today, feel free to contact us and ask us those questions directly. There were a couple of questions that popped up, which unfortunately we didn't have time to fit in. But I mean, our team is more than happy to answer your questions. So thank you very much for taking the time to attend our webinar today. There will be another one coming up very soon, so make sure you watch this space. I'd just like to say thank you so much to Danny, and thank you very much to Soumaya once again, and thank you to all of you who've attended here today. Have a very safe day, and we hope to see you very soon. Okay, thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.